All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Source Material episode 235. My name is Jesse Starcher. We're coming at you here this evening, bringing some DC 80s horror. That's right, Swamp Thing, Saga of the Swamp Thing, as a matter of fact. With me tonight to talk about some Swamp Thing, the patriarch of the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, Mark Radulich. Are you ready to talk some Swamp Thing tonight, buddy?
Sure am. I really enjoyed Alan Moore's stuff. You know, I shied away from the more known writer when we talked about Doom Patrol, and I was sorry for it. So I said, fuck it. Next time around, I'm not going to run away from, stuff written at least a high school level. I like to keep it elementary school for me. But you know what? I embrace the Alan Moore, and we were better off for it.
All right. Well, joining us on this journey all the way from the Great White North, his name is Hero. Hero has come back to the Source Material podcast. Sir, Swamp Thing, you ready?
The swamp is frozen over and we're playing a game of hockey up here in Canada there. Hey, getting ready for eating some back bacon there, guys.
Ooh, back bacon. So yeah, we're going to be talking Swamp Thing tonight. And Mark Radulich, you chose this. We're doing one of the, I think, if not the famous Swamp Thing book written by Alan Moore. We're doing issues 20 through 27, which contains the anatomy lesson, which is one of the, I think it's one of the most popular stories that I've actually ever heard of coming out of the Swamp Thing books. Mark, why don't you tell us, why did we decide to do this book?
DC put out a single season, and then it got canceled, of Swamp Thing. There's actually a couple of different, there's a Swamp Thing TV show that used to air on USA Network. There's been a couple of Swamp Thing movies. This character has made its way into various forms of media. He's a playable character in one of the Injustice video games. He's a character in the direct-to-video Justice League Dark animated movie. He's also in the Timiverse Batman Harley Quinn movie. He shows up for the weirdest fucking cameo ever with Poison Ivy and I believe
Floronic Man. Yeah, well, I had to go.
Floronic Man. I think that one, the Poison Ivy Batman direct-to-video Timiverse movie was Poison Ivy and the Floronic Man versus Batman and Harley, and Swamp Thing shows up. It's just like, hello, I'm Swamp Thing, and then disappears again into the swamp. So, but we're mainly doing it because later this week, tomorrow as a matter of fact, where you and I are going to be reviewing the DC Universe Swamp Thing show.
Very good. Let's talk about who Swamp Thing is. And I grabbed some of this from the wiki. It says, in a secret facility located in the Louisiana swamplands, scientist Alec Holland and his wife Linda invent a biorestorative formula that can solve any nation's food shortage problems. Two thugs working for Nathan Ellery, head of the criminal organization The Conclave, barge into Alec's lab, knock him out, and plant a bomb in the facility. Alec wakes up as the bomb explodes. In flames, he runs into the swamp. His body is drenched in the biorestorative formula. When he awakes, he is a horrific green creature known to others as the Swamp Thing. All right, now let's go around the horn here. I just told everybody who Swamp Thing was. Hero, why don't you tell us here, man? Swamp Thing, have you ever jumped in and read anything pertaining to this character? Did you read the main series? Tell me all about it.
So my relationship with Swamp Thing goes back to, let me see, when I was 8. So I had a really, really bad bout of food poisoning one time. So I was couch bound, and my parents brought home the 1982 Wes Craven Swamp Thing on VHS.
Oh, that's...
We'll be doing it on trial for that this Thursday.
That doesn't make sick children better, I will tell you that. But I did enjoy that movie. So anyway, I as soon as I saw the Swamp Thing, of course, going to the pharmacy where I always used to get my comic books anyway, there was this beautiful photo cover version straight from the movie of the Saga of the Swamp Thing. It was one of the earlier issues or whatever, and I started buying it. So I bought all this Alan Moore stuff. Really didn't even know it was Alan Moore at the time because, I mean, I'm 10 or 11 while I'm reading this stuff, so it didn't have the resonance that it did now. But reading it today was probably the first time since I was 10 or 11 after reading this stuff, and wow, did I miss a lot. Oh, good Lord. But yeah, my familiarity with Swamp Thing sort of drops off about late 80s and picks up again with Brightest Day. And of course, I did my reread today, and I'm very thankful I did because I really enjoyed the shit out of this thing. So,
well, how about you, Mark? Swamp Thing, I mean, have you ever read anything comic-wise that me and you haven't read together?
No. Again, my my knowledge of Swamp Thing is strictly related to the 1982 movie, and then the two direct-to-DVD, direct-to-streaming movies that I mentioned before, Justice League Dark and Batman Harley Quinn.
Okay. So I remember the movie, and I don't recall reading anything else outside of what we covered here in that was it a Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, something or other book we did where the Green and Swamp Thing shows up, but that's it. So this character to me is really completely foreign. I just knew that he existed. I knew he was a guy that had an unfortunate accident and then ended up turning into this creature. So now we jump into issues 20 through 21 of Swamp Thing. Yeah, you talk about some stuff that, wow, just completely turned things on its ear for me. So let me do a shout out to the creative team first, then I'll synopsis the first two issues of this series and we'll talk about them. Creative team, writer Alan Moore. Ladies and gentlemen, go back into the archives. You can find us talking about, we had an Alan Moore month where we talked about V for Vendetta, and Mark decided to use that for every suggestion for every book that he could never remember for at least 3 months. V for Vendetta, we talked Watchmen. We talked... What was the other one? We talked
From Hell and the League of Extraordinary Boringness.
Exactly.
Oh, come on. So
Trash.
We have touched upon Alan Moore's work here in the past. Great prolific writer. Just recently retired from comics, from what I saw. At least some of the news. I thought he'd been done with comics for a while. But
you know what my favorite thing about Alan Moore is? So
he needs a haircut.
My favorite thing about Alan Moore is that he has all of these comics that he is known for and is lauded for being adapted into movies, hates all of them. Just fucking hates the movie industry. And you would think, like, after maybe the second time it happened, he'd be like, no, I'm not going to let you adapt anything I write. You have burned me one too many. No, like an amnesia patient. He just like, well, I'll try one more. Oh, this one sucked too.
I was watching an interview today before I went to work. There's I don't know how many part, but I know it's at least up to 4 or 5 part interview DC did with Alan Moore back in the 80s, and they were specifically talking about Swamp Thing shortly after this run, I believe, or these issues that we're talking about. It was really interesting to hear him talk about comic books being made into movies, how much he wanted a movie that represented like the darker side of comics, something that was more adult. And I was like, dude, you're going to completely contradict yourself at some point. You're not going to like anything that people try to put on screen.
I don't think Alan Moore understands how movies work.
I know
there's not enough words for Alan Moore in movies. I think that's the problem.
No, could be. Very well could be. But all right. So Alan Moore, artists are Stephen Bissett and John Totleben, and colorist Tatiana Wood. All right, 20 and 21, issues 20 and 21, Loose Ends and the Anatomy Lesson. In the Loose Ends issue, Swamp Thing comes to grips with his recent victory and death of his archenemy, Anton Arcane. While the military plan to invade the swamp to take down our hero, by the end of the issue, they succeed as the Swamp Thing is shot multiple times in the torso and head, falling over dead. In the anatomy lesson, Dr. Jason Woodrue, the Floronic Man, has been hired by a general to perform an autopsy on the dead Alec Holland to find out what exactly occurred during the explosion that transformed Alec Holland into the Swamp Thing. Running out of possible answers, Dr. Woodrue figures out that all of the parts that make up Holland appear to be human-like in structure, but possess no ability to perform the act of the specific organ the plant life is replicating. This leads to the discovery that the Swamp Thing is not actually Alec Holland, but an entity that believes he is Alec Holland. When the Swamp Thing reanimates, Dr. Woodrue leaves his notes for the creature to find, and the revelation nearly drives him mad, which actually nearly is probably not the right word. It does drive him mad, to where he actually commits murder, kills the general. Mark, I'm going to start with you. Let's focus on Loose Ends and the anatomy lesson here. What were your thoughts as you read these first 2 issues?
All right. Well, first, Loose Ends is the very first Alan Moore issue, but it's like issue number 20. He was taking over the book. So 20 is kind of the bridge. It's the connective tissue between the initial run with a different creative team and the Alan Moore vision of what Swamp Thing could be. Really, things get hopping with the anatomy lesson, which I think changes Swamp Thing's origin and how we understood the character. I am in love with this comic. Like, 22 through 27 is kind of up and down for me. But if there's one shining gold standard of what a comic could be and what a poetic writer Alan Moore is when he's not full of his fucking self.
Well, you got to remember, this is really early in his career.
This is before his ego developed its own gravitational pull. It's fucking civilizations living on Alan Moore's ego. Kurt Russell's like, show me how to do that. That was a Guardians of the Galaxy 2 joke, everyone.
Ego, the living planet.
The anatomy lesson, I think, is phenomenal. First of all, the writing in it, like I said, is very poetic. It almost has like a musical quality to it, the way Alan Moore writes it, because you're getting it from the Floronic Man's perspective. He's sort of narrating this journey through the nature of this being that they thought was Alec Holland. Doing the dissection, he's looking at these organs. He was like, these are approximations. They don't have any actual function. This is, this slowly coming to understand that the Swamp Thing is actually an entity that thinks it's Alec Holland. And I really enjoyed that. See, I don't have anything to compare it to. So like he could have said Swamp Thing is a giant salad from Mickey D's, no dressing. And I'd have been like, okay, fine, whatever. I really don't know what else it was before that. But his explanation of what Swamp Thing is made me very interested in this character for like the first time ever. So that I really enjoyed.
Were you okay? Well, I'm just going to go ahead and peel back the curtain on myself here, and tell everybody I did not know Alec Holland was not Swamp Thing up until I read this issue a couple days ago or yesterday. I've always thought, just because it's probably because it's the way of comics, is that okay? We have a person, which I think this was what was intended all the way up through issue 19. We have a person that was stricken by some kind of accident and now has to live the life of a somewhat superhero. And the unfortunate case of Swamp Thing is that he's disfigured and he doesn't look anything like he used to, and he's attached to the swamp. So I've always thought it was Alec Holland inside or as this person. And in a sense it is. But then when you read the anatomy lesson, you realize that is not the case. And
go ahead,
I was going to say, I read it yesterday and I had no clue. I was like, holy shit. So everything in that issue was brand new to me. I had no clue what I was getting into.
Every iteration of Swamp Thing that I've come across almost presents him as like God, the god of the green.
Mm-hmm.
He's otherworldly. He's not concerned with the quibbles of man. He's unconcerned with whether or not man burns itself to the ground. He's like, I'm just here to protect the green. Like he comes across as a cosmic entity that's just like, he's like Captain Planet but with mud on him.
Okay.
By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet.
Captain Planet, he's our hero. Gonna take pollution down to zero.
Well,
good analogy.
Yeah. He's not really like a dude. And this for me was connective tissue to that idea. Like, oh, okay, that makes more sense now why he's presented that way.
Yeah. I just assumed it was something that had changed, or he had changed in the process of however many years. We're going on 30 some years now. I thought it was 40 actually. I thought it was some kind of change that Alec had evolved in some way to understand what he was part of. Wow.
The other thing is about, the sense of identity, that he feels like Alec Holland. Mm-hmm. And when he reads those notes that were purposely left and he's kind of being manipulated by the Floronic Man, and he's like, oh, I'm dead. I'm just an animate pile of moss.
Yeah.
that thinks I'm this other thing. And he has this like mental break for a while. I'm like, wow, this is really powerful stuff. Like
the existential crisis.
Yeah, and I mentioned offline, and I think somebody answered me, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. We'll talk about it when we review the show tomorrow, but I'm like, I really, really hope they use the anatomy lesson in the DC Universe show, because it's very powerful, and I think it speaks to the character extremely well.
So first of all, I think when I discovered that Alec Holland wasn't actually Swamp Thing, I think I was more mad. I was mad in a new DC 52 kind of way first,
Oh my.
back in the day. However, like Abigail, quickly decided that, yeah, I really dig this new turn for the Swamp Thing, I got to say. So when you separate the man from the monster, it takes on a whole new aspect. And like I said, I think there's a lot of Alan Moore bundling up a lot of his childhood animosity that comes through in this. This guy must have had some rough upbringing, and I guarantee you, he also must have had some wife problems, because this whole Matt Abigail scene that we see setting up here at the beginning, Matt is just cool with her going out to the swamp and hanging out with this Swamp Thing, and she thinks it's Alec Holland, but I think she accepts it way too well when she discovers that he's just a heap of moss, and she just continues to, dig the guy. So I found that sort of funny. Now it's a little bit later on in the story, of course. I like the fact how Alan Moore sort of wraps up everything that was in the, all the early incarnations of the Swamp Thing as well. So, I mean, in the first 2 pages, he has enough words to fill a dictionary, but it pretty well tells you about his his battle with the Arcane and the entire thing, and how he killed them and how he's moving on. And now, of course, the military is after him. Really sets the table. Alan Moore, of course, is Mr. Super Deconstruction guy, as we can see with Watchmen. And of course, he does a fantastic job here separating the Swamp Thing from the Alex Holland thing. And man, this must have been a shake-up back in the day. As a 10-year-old kid, I picked up on none of this. All I thought was, wow, Swamp Thing died at the end of this book. Look, Swamp Thing's dead. That's the only thing I took out of it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But now when I'm reading this now as an adult, I'm like, oh my God, this is an incredible piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
Let me add to that a couple of things about the writing. One, I don't think this is as dense as Watchmen. This, by comparison, is more light, more fluid, almost whimsical compared to Watchmen, which is very dense and very heavy. And I remember reading Watchmen and kind of like having to go to scan mode through some of it. I'm like, oh my God, is this meandering? Now, Alan Moore has nothing on Kevin Smith. Jesus Christ. Kevin Smith has not meant a word he hasn't yet put on a comic book page, a single comic book page. It is amazing that he can go from Jay and Silent Bob to 90,000 words on a page in a Daredevil comic. It's insane.
Unreal.
What I liked about this is this is a more restrained Alan Moore, and I think going forward, I think if he had a little less free reign, he might have produced some interesting work, because he's another one that I think needs supervision. He needs a bit of editing, because I think he's got really, really out there and fun ideas, and he's got a really nice writing style. But clearly, when he's just like, here's pages, write on them, and he has no editing whatsoever, he goes fucking crazy. It becomes very difficult, at least for me, to read. And I don't mean, and I know I joke about, I like to read books written for children. I mean, even when I put my smart brain on and I try to read his stuff, it's like, dude, you don't need to say this much. Get to the fucking point.
Mm-hmm.
I think the part of the anatomy lesson that I really dug as well was the fact when Swamp Thing realized that his lungs weren't really lungs, and they were just things that he thought would help him breathe. He didn't have a heart. It's like it didn't exist. You know what I mean? That was the fascinating thing entirely about the anatomy lesson in total. Just the discovery that this basic plant took over the consciousness of Alec Holland and just exists. Like it's not a human. It's not, Alec Holland transformed into the swamp monster. It's literally a plant that took on the memories of Alec Holland. And that's literally all this thing is.
I love how issue 21 starts out with, it's basically the Floronic Man telling us about the fate of the general that hired him. It just kind of sets the tone, like something bad is going to happen. One of the things when I was watching those videos this morning, Alan Moore was talking about his the way he writes horror. This was, of course, was back in the 80s, and he made a mention about slasher flicks. He's like, that is some type of horror, but it's not my type of horror. The way they set up, like from the first page where Floronic Man's talking about how the old man will be beating against the glass or beating against the door with his plump little bloody fists. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was really invested in the writing. I was really invested in this issue. And of course, as it unfolded, it just seemed like everything kept me attentive. I was like, oh, okay, what is this mystery? What is he going to find out about the Swamp Thing? Because I had no clue. I didn't know what I was getting into. And I think that really, really, I hope that anybody that listens to this episode read the issue before they listen to this, if you haven't read it before, because it's something to experience if you don't know exactly what you're getting into.
I would tell you that if you've never read an Alan Moore book before, like if you've heard, Watchmen or League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or anything like that, you're just like, Alan Moore seems a little too dark, a little too deep for me. I would tell you this should be the first thing you read.
Another thing that I really dig about these books as well, especially when it comes into 21, is the change in art style, and that lasts quite a while with Bassetti and the other guy. I can't remember his name right now. What's his name? Toddleben?
John? Yeah, you got it. It's John Toddleben.
This guy loves to do cross-hatching on the face.
Yes, he does.
Like, there's one particular one we'll get in a little bit later when the Justice League shows up. He does a tragic version of Firestorm. Oh my God,
dude!
Horrendous. But it really suits the mood. It's definitely something different that was on the rack back in '84. But man, I don't know, something about this artwork and the vibe of the entire book really creates this weird atmosphere and really suits it, man.
So issues 22 through 24, Swamped, Another Green World, and Roots. Barely coping with the knowledge that his life is and will never be the same, Swamp Thing returns to the swamp and apparently is putting down roots, becoming a swampy green mess, all while wrestling with leaving his humanity behind. Swamp Thing's friends Abigail and Matt try to find him and are horrified at his state. Meanwhile, the Floronic Man is still watching him, keeping tabs, performing experiments to try and understand the creature. This leads to Dr. Woodrow attaching himself through a machine to Swamp Thing, which drives him mad as he is overwhelmed by all of the Earth's plant life. Renewed with an insane sense of purpose, the Floronic Man believes he has been tasked with ridding the world of the human plague and sets out on a murderous rampage. All the while, Swamp Thing lies still in the swamp until the screams of his friend wake him out of his existential crisis. Swamp Thing knows he must stop the Floronic Man. When the two finally face off, the Floronic Man believes he is there to aid him. However, Swamp Thing is there to help humanity. As the two battle, Swamp Thing makes Floronic Man realize that his plan to kill all of humanity will eventually kill all plant life as well, as they need CO2 to survive. Now, here's the thing. I say humanity. He was also, I think, planning on killing all the animals, too. So, he's just going to wipe out all the sources that plants need in order to sustain life. And that was not a good plan. Swamp Thing makes him realize this. This, in turn, makes the Floronic Man realize the insanity of his plan and runs away, questioning his own mind. At the end of issue 24, Swamp Thing tells Abigail that Alec Holland is dead, and he is now only the Swamp Thing. So there we go. That's 22 through 24. Now, I left out the whole Justice League thing because really, they are all they're doing is sitting up in the watchtower watching. They don't even show up, do they?
There were two parts of this that was my favorite part of it. And part of it was the Justice League going, how many times have we beaten this guy? What's he doing now?
Exactly. The first time I ever saw the Floronic Man, I believe, and I might be mistaken, was in an issue of Who's Who. And, I'm a big supervillain guy. I love Lex Luthor, and I love the super-powered villains. And when I looked at Floronic Man for the first time, I was like, a guy with plants? Really? Fuck this guy. But you know what? This guy really, really is a really cool villain. The only thing that I will say about Floronic Man that is a little bit off-putting is his use of flexi flesh. Oh, yeah. He carries around the spray can of flesh, basically, and he sprays himself to look human.
There's some of this I laughed my ass off. The first one was when he plucks yam from the Swamp Thing, and he's like, "Is this even edible?" And he eats it. He's just like, "Oh, it's edible. It's wonderful." I'm dying laughing. I'm like I know that that's not meant to be funny, but me and my stupid sense of humor. I'm looking at that and I'm just like there's a comic book where a plant man is eating yams from a plant man. Well, it's funny to me.
They talked about body horror, which is really kind of what centers around here with Swamp Thing. We have a man who had been turned before we hit into here, but he was turned into this hulking green, grotesque swamp monster. Even though now Alec Holland is not part of the Swamp Thing, there's still a lot of body horror going on, especially when like Abigail sees, the Floronic Man first go grab that yam. He's like, this tuber, it resembles a yam. And she can't believe that he just picked that off of her friend. So she proceeds to almost puke, which actually she may yak. I can't remember.
Homer, stop eating yourself, but I'm so sweet and tasty.
So, when he eats the yam too, he's got like crap dripping down his mouth. And you're like, oh, dude, no. Delicious. Trust me, I had that one. I had that one written down. That was my.
You're delicious. Sorry.
And then we have in issue 22, Swamped. That was the big one where Swamp Thing's going through the crisis of trying to deal with the fact that he's losing his humanity, or that he lost his humanity. It's never been there in the first place, which is, that's tough to understand. But he's having these dreams. Alan Moore, he has a very innate sense of writing out the weirdness and quirkiness a dream can have. Like
what he's doing there is he's trying to show, not just tell, but show Swamp Thing trying to reconcile his condition.
Yeah.
Like, he snapped in the previous issue and, and he killed the general and, and then he took roots and made yams and fed starving children in Africa, the whole 9 yards, right? And then throughout these dreams, it's a matter of like reconciling and processing and trying to figure out, well, what am I? What do I want to be? At some point, he does come to realize that whether I'm Alec Holland or not, I am a sentient creature and I am lonely and I need to move forward. There were people who, I may not be Alec Holland, but they were important to him, and so they are important to me, and I want to make sure that they're safe. And then he has this, as I was saying before, he has this new obligation to protect the green, which leads him in direct conflict with the Floronic Man, who wants to, burn humanity to the ground.
Yeah, I'm looking at the one sequence where Swamp Thing's making his way through. He's got I think Abigail in his arms, or maybe it's his wife. I can't remember. You remember in the anatomy lesson, Floronic Man figured out Swamp Thing's condition by finding a page about planarian worms. So Swamp Thing's like going in another part of this dream sequence, and there's these like huge worm-looking things with like bibs on and a chef hat, and he's going, "Eats, come get your eats," and he's like, "What's going
Howdy,
on
strangers? We're just in time for a barbecue. What can I get you?"
It's just like the weirdest dream sequence. And there's a part where he goes, he's like, "Oh, by the way, you're not Jewish." He goes, "No, I come from Holland." He says, "Good, that's good. We're all just plain Aryan worms here." I'm like,
that's my kind of humor, by the way, which you could not get away with in 2019.
Well, what I like about that is that's the kind of shit that your subconscious kind of warps and puts in your dreams. That's how that shit works. So I thought Alan Moore did a fantastic job of representing and showing, somebody, number one, going through this crazy ass crisis, and then them trying to deal with it. Fantastic. Hero, go ahead, man.
I think Abigail has probably a bigger problem with his conversion to a plant, to be quite honest with you. There's a whole panel where poor long-suffering Matt has to watch her basically hug a tree and just cry, "Alex, you're not a vegetable, for God's sakes. You're a human, Alex." It's creepy, man. I don't know how else to explain it, but Abigail's relationship with Swamp Thing, or at least this basically what it is here now, a steaming pile of swamp moss.
Yeah.
is kind of weird.
Poor Matt. How small do you have to feel in the pants to be like, I got outmanned by a houseplant?
Boy, did they paint a picture of this guy. This guy is always there. He's sitting home drinking while his wife attends to the swamp monster in the swamp. This poor guy. This guy is what I would call a schlem.
What do I have to do to get you to pay attention to me? I don't know. Grow tomatoes at your ass.
I don't know much about this character. I just could tell. Does this dude have some kind of powers, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
It seems to point that way, especially in the later issues. I don't know, like, anything past I don't recall anything, like I said, past issue 27 right now. But okay. It certainly appears that this guy's got some weird shit going on.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was all in his head because he's drinking and yeah, their relationship is definitely strained, considering he is, I think, lying to her and saying that he's not drinking anymore, when in fact, as soon as she's out the door, he's grabbing the bottle. Anything else about 22 through 24? Swamped, I mean, we got, Floronic Man and his craziness. I thought that was an interesting battle, and how this guy decided. I thought it was pretty damn scary. He went into the town and like fucking crushed all the houses, and then
here's my problem with this. In 2019, I've already seen Poison Ivy do this routine. I've seen a couple of other like eco-terrorist type deals where it's like, you know what the problem with the Earth is? Fucking humans. Granted, this was written in 1984.
Yeah, I was going to say, there are quite a few years between this and The Happening. M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, sir.
I want to talk about Justice League for a second. I mean, we're about to dismiss him, but there's such a scene, and it has to do with the entire, like, it seems like this came out of like a 1960s Batman episode, played for parody, I think. So they're up in the satellite, they're discussing about what's going to happen with the Floronic Man. And then they just come with this big deduction. So check this out. They say, this is Firestorm talking now. He said, the problem's with the oxygen balance, right? So why don't I, and then it just goes ... And then someone off screen goes, use your atomic restructuring abilities to convert oxygen molecules and carbon dioxide to restore the balance? Yes, I thought that would work. Like, who just comes up with that shit?
Batman.
Yeah. Good Lord.
Yeah, they don't even get involved. It was kind of like, I think it was at the end of that one issue, or at least close to the end of the issue, when the Floronic Man he's wreaking havoc, and they're like, get the Justice League. And they're, oh shit, here comes the Justice League next issue, and they watch TV. And
they're like, yeah, this guy's not worth our time.
It reminded me of when we read Black Lightning, the one issue with Superman, where it was just like, nothing can exist on its own. There's always an editor going, listen, you seem to be doing well, but we're not sure about sales. Fucking stick Superman in this. But he has no place in the story. I have a vision. Fuck John Cena, get him.
Well, listen, DC is a little more subtle than Marvel. I mean, my good Lord, if a book in Marvel Comics dropped one single issue in sales, Wolverine would come out of the woodwork.
Yep.
It's Speedball and Wolverine. Oh, good Lord, they're teaming up.
Mike, what are you doing in this book with the cab as Wolverine? I don't fucking know.
Literally, they didn't even know why they're in the book. I mean, I'll give you a great example. So there was a 2-issue, and I don't know if it was meant to be 2 issues. They tried to adapt the show Sledgehammer into a Marvel comic, okay? And of course, it did poorly on the stand. So guess who showed up in issue 2? It was Spider-Man.
Are you kidding me?
Of course.
Sure.
Spider-Man.
I've seen the Floronic Man's plot one too many times, and I understand in 1984 it might have been newer, might have had more sheen to it. I can't help but, from my perspective, look back on that and go, wasn't that quaint? Aw, you want to burn the earth down too. I just watched a movie where the plot was, we need this virus to kill off half the human race in order to evolve it. And you can check out our review of Damn You Hollywood's Hobbs and Shaw up in the archives right now on the Rattlegion Broadcasting Network.
Cheap plug.
Nice segue.
Thank you. What I want to say before we move on, because I don't want to get into the Monkey King without talking about this first, is I think the Floronic Man thought he was undefeatable because through, the Swamp Thing was sort of the gateway to the plant world that he was using to wipe out humanity. And he figured, well, the Swamp Thing's taken root. He's given up his humanity. He's given up this pretense that he's Alec Holland. Surely with his desire to protect the green, they're on the same page. And it's the classic villain, hubris, where he thinks like, oh, I've dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's. I'm invincible now. And, as it turns out, this is the big hero turn. This is the ta-da moment. This is when Rocky starts to make the comeback. The Swamp Thing's like, no, I'm not Alec Holland, but I don't want this chick here to die. And I don't think humans are bad. And so you're disconnected from the green. And the Floronic Man's like, oh, fuck me. I have no powers. And then Superman's like, come on, off the jail. And he's like, oh, you got me, Papa.
It was literally it was so fast paced. He went from this supervillain who was ready to shut down the world and, kill all the animals and burn everything to the ground to, oh, we're all done. Yeah. There's one scene. Do you remember the scene where the guy comes at him, Evangeline, he comes at him with this, with a chainsaw?
Yeah,
And he goes,
well, the chainsaw is actually called Evangeline.
yes. He goes, Mister, I don't know from annihilating angels, but I sure know a candy butt when I see one. Turn around. I want you to meet Evangeline. And oh boy. And he's like, with that, you dare threaten me? And he tries to cut him down with a chainsaw, and then it just all goes to shit. And then he's easily defeated. Like it's the weirdest ending for a supervillain. I mean, it puts him in his place, making a wonder the Justice League were making fun of his ass.
It is no wonder he wrote Watchmen, because Alan Moore isn't really interested in superhero battles. He's interested in using superheroes to tell modern day myths and parables. You know, he's into philosophy, and and it's so funny because this goes back to the Doom Patrol series, Jesse. You know, where Mr. Nobody's just like, all right, now after this meandering tale, we're finally get to the punchy part, and they don't actually do that. You know, because they're making fun of that sort of thing where, you know, I always talk about this with the Wonder Woman movie. They actually wrote a really compelling movie up until the end where she has a one-on-one fight with a CGI monster.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, well, 2/3 of this movie was good, you know, and it's like, because if you don't have that gratifying punchy part, you lose a part of your audience that only bought the comic for the punchy part. And so Alan Moore isn't really interested in that. And boy, does it show in how he concludes the story, because everything leading up to it was fine. You know, this idea, this sort of 1984 idea of eco terrorism and propriety. It was like, oh, man is the virus, that sort of thing. Like, you can see Alan Moore playing with these different ideas and, you know, and having fun with this sort of like D-list character, Swamp Thing. And editors like, you didn't write an ending to this. Like, oh, fuck, Superman takes him. You fix your comic, Alan. You can't just leave it like this. Fucking Superman comes down and I am the Lord of Snakes. Yeah.
Yep. Contractually obligated to get the old Justice League in there. And there you go.
I guarantee Alan Moore privately threw a tantrum about that.
He probably did not like it.
No,
absolutely.
No, I think his first draft was he actually peed on the page and handed that in, and they were like, "This page is damp, Alan. What are you doing?"
I bet you that's why they inserted that ridiculous piece of dialogue between Firestorm and Superman. That is Alan Moore taking a piss on the Justice League right there.
It's fucking filth. All right, well, The Sleep of Reason, at a time of running and by demons driven. Issues 25 through 27 of Swamp Thing here. So Abigail starts a new job at a place called the Elysium Lawns Center for Autistic Children, where she meets a child by the name of Paul, who has a troubled past as his parents were both killed in a freak accident involving a Ouija board that summoned a demon called the Monkey King. And now he is back to feast on all the fears of the little children of the home. Also in town is one Jason Blood, a man with the uncanny supernatural ability to predict the future, specifically when people are going to die, and who is also bound to that rhyming demon Etrigan. As the Monkey King feasts on everyone's fears, child and adult alike, Swamp Thing and Etrigan must team up to take it down. But it is only when the young child Paul is able to overcome his fear of the Monkey King, and the Monkey King begins to lose power and shrinks to a size small enough to where Etrigan can end the threat by promptly chewing him up and eating him. I do want to talk about, there is a small side story that we've kind of already mentioned that's building up to something. Matt and Abigail's relationship has been on the rocks for a while. Matt is a recovering or not so recovering alcoholic, hiding his disease from his wife, but when he believes she is not paying enough attention to him, he begins to drink and treat her pretty badly, pretty horribly.
Like you do.
In issue 27, after Abigail leaves at the end of an argument, Matt gets drunk and hops in the car to go find her, wrecking it and nearly killing himself. On the brink of death, it appears Matt strikes a bargain with a fly. And when Abigail sees it...
Why not? He's not getting anything from Abigail.
I guess. When Abigail sees him pull up the car, and Matt seemed to be no worse for wear. So, yeah, there's some strange stuff there. So we're starting with Hero here. I mean, you said this scared the shit out of you, right?
I literally remember reading this as a kid, and I'm thinking, what a stupid character the Monkey King is. Boy, this is like I've had this nightmare 100 times.
Ow.
Good Lord. I don't know, man. This this is some sick stuff. I mean, they took mental illness and they combined it with fears and I mean, there's a lot of stuff to take away from this. And this is right up Alan Moore's alley. I mean, it gives them something to feast on. I think this could adapt really well to one of the TV shows. So if they haven't done this already, this is an easy adaptation. This is horror in the clearest sense. And, this is really, really, when you're looking at it, you're selling these comics to 8 and 10-year-olds. And I'm not sure if the content was clearly intended for an 8 and 10-year-old back in the day. I mean, who was Alan Moore writing for? Really? I mean, this was a year when
Alan Moore.
Yes, he was literally writing for Alan Moore, because I mean, it's not like today where the same, kids who bought this are still, big crybaby man babies in trying to steal comic books from kids' hands if they got a copy that they wanted off their pick list. You know what I mean? These are actual kids buying comic books here.
I want to,
what I'm talking about.
I want to stop. I want to hop in here real quick, because something that was mentioned today and what I was watching was, we didn't get to it, but issue 29 of Saga of the Swamp Thing, not code approved. And I was like, okay, what was the big deal there? So he goes on to talk about how the reason they got in trouble, he was like, I didn't understand that incest and all this other stuff was not approved, was not smiled upon here in the States. He says apparently
Moore and Vince McMahon grew up in neighboring trailers. Jesus fucking Christ.
I guess culturally over in England, this is something that's been bantied about. I guarantee you fucking Monty Python's probably done a sketch on it. And it's like part of the fucking culture up there. But I guess, to your point there, Hero, they're talking about some really adult things in this comic book, to where in 2 issues from the end of this run that we're talking about, the code's like, nah, we're not touching that shit.
Well, think about this. This thing would literally taste the children while they're in their bed. I mean,
it was licking
this
their
is
face.
This is not cool, man. This is way over a child's head, and shame on you, Alan Moore. But you know what? It's a good read at Chris at 45 is all I'll tell you.
Yeah.
The amount of crying and public nonsense that goes on social media. Could you imagine a comic where there's a demon monkey licking children in their sleep?
This would be drawn and quartered in the streets if this was released in 2019. The man babies would be crying.
Mark, what do you think of Etrigan? I mean, is this the first time you ever read anything with that character in it?
No, there's another one that shows up in Justice League Dark, and I think he might have shown up in the Teen Titans movie dealing with Raven. Totally remember. Well, I've seen. He's definitely a character I'm somewhat familiar with in just the varying things I've experienced with DC, both in the comic and the TV shows and/or made-for-TV movies. So
there's
I was very aware of this character.
Jason Blood.
Versus John Cena coming up next. So there was some weird whacked out shit that happened in these issues too. I mean,
I was not crazy about this storyline, and I feel like Alan Moore was like, next Swamp Thing versus the Green Lantern, and or Mogo of the Green Lantern Corps, and it's like, and the DC editor is like, you could have the Monkey King. No one's using him, and Alan Moore's like, I shall write an epic with the Monkey King, and he will lick children.
This is another case where they easily dispatch the main villain. So, literally the kid just decides, oh, I'm not afraid of you anymore. And and the demon eats him. So basically just think about Freddy Krueger in the early movies. The kids basically wake up and go, oh, you're just a dream. We're not afraid of you anymore. And Freddy's like, no. And he goes away. You know what I mean? Same sort of deal.
Good point.
The whole Floronic Man thing from 20 through the end of that storyline, I really enjoyed it. I said it was one of the best things we read this year. The Monkey King stuff, however, kind of falls off for me. The kid kind of repeating and spelling things out, I was like, the Monkey King as sort of this like esoteric horror, Nightmare on Elm Street type character. I was like, Jason Blood. Like I said, I'm familiar with him. I don't love him as a character. But it was like
Jason Blood.
This is Alan Moore kind of doing Alan Moore things. Not everything is going to be a winner. It's like I kind of just wanted to get through him and be done with it.
Okay, all right.
So one thing I got to put this in here. This has to go in here. So Matt is also struggling. Abigail Abigail decides she wants to have a job. So, of course, she gets a job at a institution, basically.
They're fucking living in a hotel. They've got to do something here.
Yes, yes, exactly. How many warning signs do you have to get when you know that this job is not for you?
Oh, yeah.
Remember when there's, I'm not sure exactly what page this is on. Well, I think it's page 7 of issue 26. So she shows up at work. She opens up the door, and out comes Crazy Vince, and he's got no clothes on. He's attacking her. He's completely naked, and he's screaming at her, "Animal, animal." She just goes, "Oh, gee." And then, to make matters worse, the guys just jump poor naked Vince, stick him in a in a mat, which they keep kids in. So they roll them up in mattresses, and they're kind of cool with that. And the exact words are, "Oh, Vince, you got to get this guy straightened out. John, we better get him into that mat."
Yep. I quit. Mark, I mean, final thoughts. You definitely enjoyed yourself here.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed the anatomy lesson and the whole Floronic Man storyline. Look, I gave Alan Moore kind of a ration of shit, and I think a lot of it he deserves, but the one thing I won't take away from the man is he is a talented writer. He is 100% the writer I could never be. I think what gets in the way of Alan Moore really writing something special sometimes is Alan Moore and his understanding of how capitalism and comic book buyers work. I feel like it's a fun medium for him to kind of play in, but I think he rubs up against some of the limitations. These things still have to sell. You know, he is definitely, if he were a filmmaker, he definitely strikes me as one of these guys who would be making like these like student art films, you know, where there's no plot and it's characters smoking cigarettes and the screen changes color. And it's like, see, man, it's about it's about the end times and how the government wants to. And it's like by the end of that explanation, you're like, just give me the pot or whatever it is you're smoking. It's fine. I think when I read a lot of Alan Moore's stuff, what I get is there's this internal struggle that comes out on the page that, you know, like he wants to be esoteric and he is confined by the fact that he's got to sell stuff. And it's like he just tries to reconcile those two things. And that anguish really does come out sometimes more so than others.
Mm-hmm. In this particular case, though, just like you said, he had an editor, and this probably ranks up there, just like you said. This is one of the better ones from Alan Moore that I've read. So
I'm interested in reading more of. I want to finish the other 2 volumes of Alan Moore Saga of the Swamp Thing because this ends with I think it's Arcane who offers. Was it Matt?
I assume it's Arcane. I don't know who it is. It's some kind of fly.
He gets one of these deals where like, you know, he dies in a car crash basically. He's like, well, you know, I'll let you live, but blah blah. Yeah, he makes a deal with the devil basically.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where that's going, so I want to read more of these.
Okay. All right, Chris Bailey, final thoughts.
Loved it. I'm actually want to read more right now, but yeah, there's definitely some weird stuff going on. Mr. Alan Moore is a creepazoid times 10, but I will say, really enjoyed this. Boy, did I miss a lot when I was a kid. The nuances I did not understand as an 8 or 10-year-old, and I'm glad I didn't, to be quite honest with you, because I'd probably still be seeing the Monkey King tonight in my dreams. I guarantee you. Nope. Overall, super read. I'm very thankful I got to read this and reignite my passion for the Swamp Thing.
This brings our discussion of Saga of the Swamp Thing, issues 20 through 27, to a close here. Mark Radulich, we'll start with Hero. Hero, well, let's hear what you've got going on here. We got something big upcoming here pretty soon, right?
We got the Super Blog team up are returning to the blogosphere with some podcasts and blogs. They're coming back on August 28th, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on under the theme of Immortal. So nobody really ever dies in comic books, and you'll find out all about it on August 28th. Join us. You can hook me up and find me on the Twitter at Charlton_Hero. You can check out some of my retro ramblings over at the Superhero Satellite. Just give it a Google. You'll find me. All kinds of stuff on comic book, wrestling, TV shows, and the not. So, and of course, I'm always here waiting on the line in the proverbial abyss, waiting for Mark and Jesse to pick up the phone or the Skype as it may be, and give me a shout. So that's me.
All right, very good. All right, Mark Radulich, what do we got going on in the schedule, sir?
Tomorrow, you and I will be reviewing the Swamp Thing series from DC Universe. On the 21st, we're reviewing on the Metal Hammer of Doom, Viotis Moida, Human Target. And then on Thursday, Bloody Thursday.
Sorry, I did an Alan Moore impression.
we will be doing an on-trial for the aforementioned 1982 Swamp Thing, directed by Wes Craven, where Adrian Barbeau gets stabbed in the tit.
Oh, my.
All you need to know about that movie.
Yes.
Left quite an impression on me. The day after that, we got a special Friday edition of TV Party Tonight. Myself, Al Sedano, and Jesse Starcher will be reviewing the Amazon Prime series Good Omens. So that'll be fun. August 24th, we've got some boxing going on. I need confirmation from our new man, Victor Kirkado, to see if we're going to be doing the Figueroa versus Shakan fight on FS1. There's also the Sergey Kovalev, Anthony Yard fight on ESPN Plus. So if I can find someone willing to cover that, we'll do that one also on ESPN Plus. It takes place in Chelyabinsk, Russia. Yard. For the WBO World Light Heavyweight title, Sergey Kovalev versus Anthony Yard. You might have actually heard Chris Bailey and the rest of the Podsmen cover SummerSlam. We did that on August 13th. We talked about Ring of Honor Super Summer Card, NXT TakeOver Toronto, and SummerSlam from the WWE. So go ahead and check that out. Next week, we've got on Sunday, the 25th, we will be doing a show with Ronnie Adams, Screaming Boy Podcast. Myself and Alexis Hayner are going to talk D23 and whatever announcements they make at that convention. We got DC First, Superman Lobo, Krypton Season 2, Rage of Light Imploder, the Banana Splits horror movie. Myself and Alexis will be talking about that. And then finally, Chris Bailey.
You didn't say that tonight.
I do that every show, by the way.
It never gets old. It never gets old. As soon as NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff ends, myself and Pat Mullen will do a quick review of that just in time for you to then turn it off and turn on AEW. Hey, maybe Orange Cassidy will kick somebody in the shins. Because it's AEW, I'm all the way out, zip.
I hope he eats a ham sandwich while he does it.
I hope so. And then if he takes a really big bite of a ham sandwich, Joey Janela will land on his head.
Ladies and gentlemen, you could go back in the archives. You could check out our first ever Unspoken Issues official podcast on Prototype, and soon thereafter should be our episode on Magnus Robot Fighter #1. And the polls on the Unspoken Decade should be coming up here pretty soon. I think Dean Compton's going to get involved. That's right. So check that out if you're into 90s comics. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Mark Radlich. That over there is Chris Bailey. Over there is fucking Alan Moore. We're out of here. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Snakes, not Tony Babaluke.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Rattlich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
And green could be big like an ocean, or important like a mountain, or tall like a tree.
Oh my goodness. Put your swamp thing away.
Hey, look, I'll make the dick jokes around here, sir.
You have a up-the-back bad shit attack?
Well, it was either take a shit or continue to listen to Chris's Canadian back bacon story, and honestly, I almost shit my pants. Florentine Man? What's his name?
Florida Man.
Florida Man, yes. Alan Moore has a belly tattoo like Phil Ansama that says bitches be whores. Oh my god, Jesse saw a movie and made a reference I didn't understand. Good night, everybody. Because you know yams, right?
But you yam if you do, and you yam if you don't. I'm here for all the 5-year-olds.
This Jason Blood guy, probably one of the worst names. How unoriginal are you to make a character called Jason Blood?
First round name before they decided to go with Jason Blood was Max Evil Guy.
Alan Moore is a questionable man.
I'm sorry. I'm just picturing like Alan Moore dressed as Gandalf and Grant Morrison dressed as Merlin and them having a wizard's duel.
Thank
Sorry, you said naked Vince, and now all I'm thinking about is Vince McMahon on Raw doing that as a character.
We don't need that.
God damn it, pal. Look at my dick.
Good shit, pal. You see my grapefruits? Roman Reigns, put these over.
I see no fucking bad magic coming my way, Mark.
You don't need Alan Moore showing up in front of your house in his Gandalf costume, throwing 20-sided die at you. Yeah, I have one problem with your zero-issue podcast, by the way.
What the fuck is your problem with... Why do you even have a comment on...
Not enough mention of me or the network.
Oh.
It's right underneath the human centipede clause.
Oh, that's the punishment for not mentioning the network. Being part of a human centipede. All right, we're done. Can plugs at the end. That's all we need. Let's journey inside the mind of Alan Moore.
I mean, I think there was one of those ancient Chinese sages who say so many deep and interesting things, and they said that in order for your audience to enjoy your work, you've got to enjoy it.
All right.
Picking up all the plants on the earth, and the women are all holes.
I so wanted to do an Alan Moore impression. I tried one there like a couple years back, and I failed completely. But damn, watching his interviews again, I was like, I can do this. I know I can. Just gotta stop. I gotta talk really low and really slow.
The women are holes.
I know, just the bitches be horse.
No, bitches be horse. All right.
The Alan Moore impression just gets better.
As long as the word whore is involved, I think we're going to be fine.
No.
They want me to draw a fucking firestorm. I'm not drawing fucking firestorm. I'm gonna fucking give them firestorm.
Oh, shit. Fuck the Justice League. It's fucking filth. I'll fucking curse you and your fucking family.
The women are holes.
Ladies and gentlemen.
You're a wizard, Alan.
Fucking Harry Potter.
We're fucked.
Why are we making Alan Moore sound like Joey Bag of Donuts? I don't understand.
Who cares? It's funny.
So,
I'm not fucking Italian.
all right. So anyway, you gotta go.
It's just funny. It is.
End this fucking shit show.
I feel like you need to reach a contract that anything that goes up on the network needs to be mentioned about the network.
No fucking do contracts.
Stupid Mark Redlich.
All right.
Alan, you should hear this podcast. This fucking podcast. These fucking guys. I grew up in a normal home. My mom, my dad, we had apple pie. I'm fine. These fucking guys.
Meanwhile, at DC Comics... Alan, come in. Yes, I want to talk to you about the new Swamp Thing issue. I noticed that sales were down, and we kind of want you to fit the Justice League in there. Just need you to wrap up that little Swamp Thing you're doing there, and we're just going to get the Justice League in on some action there and sell some books to Guy. Go ahead there, man, and just work that right in there to your story, and that'll be great. You want me to write some fucking Justice League into me goddamn Swamp Thing? Are you fucking mad, man? No, Alan, actually, I just want you to put the Justice League in there so we can sell some books. You want me to fucking put Firestorm in there? I don't fucking like Firestorm. You can... Yeah, what the fuck do you want me to do? I'm writing my fucking Swamp Thing. Yeah, the Swamp Thing is just not selling there, Alan. So here, just fit this little bit of dialogue in there that we wrote for you, and just go ahead and put that in there, and I'll expect that ready to go by Monday. Thanks, Guy. I'm out of here. You motherfucker. I'll give you a fucking Firestorm. I'll give you a fucking Firestorm.